Right, as normal, you've got your task on the board. Let's just look at this together. Write down 5 or more questions you would want to ask about this object, or guesses about what it was used for. So have a little think about that. Look at it closely. What would you want to ask about that object? Or can you already guess? Can you make some ideas? Can you think of some ideas about what that might be used for? All the lessons that I teach start with the same approach. That is that they know that they come straight into the classroom, there's always a task on the board, and they sit straight down, find the equipment that they need, take their coats off, unpack their bags, and get started. And because that's become a routine, there's no problem with children not being focused at the start of the lesson. Right, okay. Can you give me some suggestions? What are the sort of questions that you would like to know about this object? Joe?
Is it a kind of weapon?
Right, is it a kind of weapon? Alex?
What does it symbolise?
Right, a lot of you have written that down.
Is it an important tool?
Right, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Is it a tool, perhaps? Can we move on and think about what might it have been used for? Over in the corner, Louise.
Was it used for chaining the slaves together around their necks?
Right, okay, so there's someone already thinking about the idea of slaves. The main issue in the lesson today is about involving the children and motivating them, because it's the first lesson of a new topic. Therefore, the learning styles are very much based around discussion and pupil involvement and giving children the chance to actually express their ideas confidently. Here I actually have a picture of the object being used. Now this is a modern day person, okay, who's actually showing how that object would have been used. And if you look at it, you can see that a lot of you were correct in your suggestions that it might have been to do with slavery. Can anyone suggest what do we actually mean by the word slave? Can we try and draw together some ideas about what is a slave? Emma?
Is it a man owned by another man?
Right, now that's an excellent suggestion, isn't it? Okay, so if you were owned by someone else, what does that mean, Kane?
Like you're not having freedom.
Right, you've got no freedom.
And you might have to do like stuff for the other man.
Right, so you'd have to work for the other man, yeah. And what are you not going to get? What do I get when I come to work? Thank you very much.
And you're not going to get paid.
What we're going to look at in this lesson is the idea of people being taken from Africa to America, okay? They were being traded, people were being traded. Now trade, what do we mean by the word trade?
Like buying something and then selling it on for more or less or whatever.
Right, okay, so it's the idea of buying and selling something. So if we put those two things together, we're beginning to get the idea that slaves are going to be bought and sold, okay? What we're really trying to get our heads around this lesson are these key questions, okay? Just have a look at those now. Read them to yourselves. Sharing objectives obviously are key to the success of the lesson. I use a key question approach. The key questions will be shared with the pupils. They will be returned to regularly through the lesson at a particular point to draw the learning together and to move the discussion on. Suddenly we get this great increase in the slave trade, and that is what I want us to try and understand, try and explain. Now, there are lots of reasons why that happened, but I have the answer for you, okay? And here it is. This is going to take you by surprise, perhaps, okay? It's all to do with this. We can explain that strange happening through that bag of sugar. Lewis.
Is it because the slaves were used for like cutting sugarcane?
Right. The question I want you to get your heads around is who wanted it?
The royals and the nobles and the kings.
Okay. Basically, what is happening is that people are getting a sweet tooth. At that time, people suddenly decided they loved this stuff, okay? Some new drinks had just come onto the market, okay? People were drinking tea and coffee and chocolate as a drink. In 1700, that was the amount consumed per year by a person. 100 years later, it would have been 9 of those for each person. A major increase. All right, the sugar was produced in America, but there weren't enough people there to do the work. So the slaves were going to have to come from Africa in order to do that work. And what we need to do now is to understand a little bit more clearly how this trade actually took place. So I have here a map, which I think you will find begins to make this much clearer. So this is known as the slave trade triangle. Right, okay, now I'm going to set you a little bit of a challenge for the next part of the lesson. I'm going to set this room up as if it was the slave triangle. So we're going to have Great Britain over here on the board. We're going to have West Africa over here. And we're going to have the West Indies over here. So those are the 3 places. The challenge for you will be to get the right goods from one place to another. So we need a few volunteers to take some cards around the room and see if you can get them in the correct places. Okay, Joe, there's yours. Kane, there's yours. What I'd like to do is to move to the place where you think that that thing on your card, that good, that article would have been made, where it originated, where it came from. Okay? Have a little wander around, think about where you're going. Compare what you've got. I want you to move now to the place where your goods were being taken. Off you go. Okay, right. You can see what was happening. I think most people have got a good understanding now of how that triangle worked. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a set of pictures. There's 5 pictures in this envelope. Okay, and what I want you to do with these is to start with West Africa and to put them into the correct order. The first sequencing activity used 5 sources, which were pitched at a fairly straightforward level. They took the really key points of the slave trade, and therefore they were accessible to the majority of pupils. They still needed a bit of help, but basically it built their confidence up and they got the basic picture. You're reckoning that's your first one? Yeah. Why do you think that's West Africa? What's happening?
Because in West Africa there's loads of slaves and they got captured by the king's orders.
So what were these people before they were slaves? Right, they were normal, free people. The second sequencing activity involved another 4 sources, which were more complicated, a bit more difficult to use, and therefore that put challenge into the work. In addition, there were caption cards which some pupils used straight away, and it obviously gave them some hints and some help. Other pupils, I suggested, didn't use the caption cards straight away and only used them as a way of self-assessing their work at the end. Therefore, there is inbuilt differentiation and challenge in that activity. So I think you were right to have that up there.
So, notice they're holding a baby.
I know. So did you read what it said underneath?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're actually just literally ripping families apart. Yeah? Ah, yeah, brilliant. Okay, that's good. You've got some excellent thinking going on. So give me the story then so far.
So they're being attacked and then taken away.
Okay.
This is when they're being taken away. And then they're loaded onto the ship. That's when they're inside the ship. And then they're taken and sold.
Okay. So, thinking hard, at what point in this first bit, because we know this must be in West Africa, at what point would they actually be swapping guns for slaves? When you got them being loaded on the boat there.
Yeah, so
It might be.
Yeah, I reckon that would make good sense of it, wouldn't it? Yeah?
Sir?
Yeah.
why is there 3 blank ones?
Ah, right. Very good question. What do you think we might be going to do with those 3 blank ones? Do you think have we got the whole story here?
Might write them in, put them in between, like, to say what's going on in between.
Right, so it's possible that we need some extra information to make some further links or some bits that we haven't covered at all. Maybe there's some bits still to come. Okay, that's really good. Right, so hold on to those for later. Very quickly then, which one now, a letter or a number, do you have right at the beginning, Lucy?
D.
Okay, what's going on in D, Lucy? Just read me the caption.
An attack on an African tribe.
Right, an attack on the African tribe. That starts the whole thing off, doesn't it? Okay, very good. What comes next, please? Let's go over to Lucy.
3.
Okay, and what's going on in 3?
Slaves are captured and taken to the coast.
Excellent. Everyone in agreement with that? We're all sorted on this. That's very good. Well done. Okay, let's go over to Ben now. What's the third one, Ben? What we're going to do next is we're going to watch just a very short extract of a video programme about the slave trade. And your task is to see if you can pick up some things that happen on the video, particularly about what it was like to be a slave and how the slaves reacted, okay? And I want you to write those things onto your caption cards.
The chains on my wrist and ankles rub my skin to the bone.
Here and here, we can pick here and here. They would give. They were captured by their own people. Like that.
I think you've come up with some great ideas. What I'd like to do is hear a few of your ideas. Lucy, please.
We had many people died on the ships because of the filthy conditions they were kept in.
Excellent. And where are you going to put that one?
With the slaves on board slave ships.
Very good. Okay, what other new captions have you written? Let's have Emma, please.
Slaves had to walk for hundreds of miles.
Right, now that's really good because what I think you might have felt when you looked at these pictures was that it all happened very quickly, didn't it? Quite often, there was a long, long time before they were captured and before they were actually put on a ship to go to the West Indies. Okay, let's go to Lucy, please.
When sold, they weren't even allowed to keep their own names and were given European names by the master.
Right, that's absolutely excellent. Remember that what we were trying to check out today were those two key questions. Why were black people from Africa taken to America? And what was this experience like for those people? What I want to have is a few people, one at a time, to come and volunteer to take us through that process. Let's try Martin. All right, Martin's going to come out.
I reckon that the reason why the slaves actually got caught is because the British here wanted sugar, which I think came from America, was what you said.
Very good, yeah.
But in order to do that, they needed more workers, the Americans. So the British came down to West Africa and got slaves.
Would anyone like to ask Martin a question at that point? He said they got slaves.
Did they give stuff to the West Africans to get the slaves first?
They traded guns, gunpowder, tables, really, cloths.
The plenary in this lesson is a fairly active one. Children are asked or volunteer to come to the front. They use the OHP to present their understanding of the learning that they've had in this lesson. I use that method on a lesson like this because it builds their confidence, it creates real interaction between them and their peers in the class, and because there are a number of children who are not confident in writing but are very confident in expressing themselves orally. So it's a real opportunity for them to show what they've learnt.
I don't actually want to know what it was like for them because the pain and suffering they must have gone through. Being separated from your families and not knowing anyone there, cramped in small spaces, must have been really painful for them. Because if you look on there, you can see that the things around the neck must be pulling them, and If you don't do what you're told, you get shot.
Just to sum up what I think we have really been looking at and what came across from some of the things that you were saying to us. 5 key ideas. It says there were a number of reasons why black people were taken from Africa to America, such as the popularity of sugar in Europe. Secondly, trade took place in a triangle from Britain to Africa, from Africa to America, called the Middle Passage, and from America back to Britain. Thirdly, different goods were transported on different legs of the journey. For example, guns on the first leg, and you know about slaves on the second. Okay? Then some of you talked very movingly about that as well. Becoming a slave in America, especially during the Middle Passage, was a horrendous experience for black people from Africa. And then finally, picking up on one thing that someone said to me earlier in the lesson. So what do we need to know about Africa at this time that can explain why so many people became slaves? We've seen that there were black people involved in capturing other black people. So what is that all about? What was Africa like? Why was that happening? That's what we'll be tackling in our next lesson.